Hey, how's it going? I really like the shirt you're wearing today. Blue is a really good color on you. Really brings out the color in your eyes. Let me know in the comments where you got it from. Hey guys, what's going on? It's your boy, back at it again with another Minecraft video, and today we're going to be talking about recommendation letters. As you guys may or may not have noticed, today I'm wearing my Stanford hat. I'm wearing it because today my hair is kind of a mess. So we're gonna keep this on. I feel like people don't talk about recommendation letters as much as they should. Maybe it's because you have less control over it than the other parts of your college applications, but every part of your college application is pretty important. So if you aren't already aware, recommendation letters are another component of your college applications, just like your test scores and your essays. But the difference is that recommendation letters are written by another person. Most colleges ask for recommendation letters from your teachers or your college counselor, but you can basically ask anyone who's an adult for a recommendation letter. You can ask a coach, your boss at work, or basically any adult who supervises an activity that you do. And some schools like Dartmouth also take peer recommendation letters, so that means that you could ask your friend or even a family member for one. The purpose of a recommendation letter is the same as any other part of your application. It's meant to demonstrate your candidacy to the school and let them know why you would be a good fit for them. They're meant to show another side to your application that you can't express through your test scores and your GPA alone. But they're different from other parts of your application because you're not the one writing them. So for admissions officers, these letters are especially valuable because they reveal your character and personality in different settings from an outside perspective. Because it's one thing if you say that you're hardworking and diligent, but it's more impactful if another person also says the same thing about you. This means that ideally, the recommendation letters you get corroborate and even build upon what you say in your application. So when it comes to good recommendation letters, ideally you would be asking people who you know pretty well so that they can speak to your character the best. So that could be a teacher who you've known for a number of years or a teacher whose class you participated in a lot. Because the better that the person knows you, the more things that they can talk about in your letter. It's also really important that the people who you ask to be your recommenders are people who you have good relationships with, because ideally you want your recommendation letters to talk about you favorably. It doesn't make sense to ask someone you have a bad relationship with to write your recommendation letter. You want these letters to really show off your good personality traits, your different strengths, the qualities that make you unique, and you also want these letters to be well written overall. And while you definitely don't need recommendation letters that use really flowery language, admissions officers should be able to see that your recommenders put a lot of time and effort into these letters. I guess in short, your recommenders should be like your hype men. The more that they talk about you really well, the better you look in your applications. So for example, if your teacher recommender says that you're the best student that they've had all year, that sounds pretty good. But if your teacher says you're the best student they've had in their whole career, that's even better. So the more good things your recommenders say about you, the better it is. So for my recommendation letters, I had 4 of them. 3 of them were from teachers and 1 of them was from my college counselor. Usually you only need 2 or 3 recommendation letters, but some of the schools I applied to had different requirements, so I needed another one. All of my recommenders were people I had really good relationships with and I had known them for a number of years. Between me and my college counselor, we had a pretty solid relationship, which I think is really important because your college counselor is going to be writing recommendation letters for everyone in your senior class. So if you have a good relationship with your college counselor, they'll have more things to write about you. And just in general, you should try to have a good relationship with your college counselor because they can really help you out during the college application process. And for my teacher recommenders, I asked people whose classes I did really well in and participated a lot in, because those recommendation letters are meant to show how you are as a student. So you don't want to ask a teacher whose class you did really poorly in or didn't participate a lot in, because they're not going to have that many good things to say about you. I also wanted the teachers I asked to be people who knew me inside and outside the classroom, because if they can talk about me in those different settings, it really helps to round out my character. So the teachers I asked were also my cross-country and track coaches and my history bowl advisors. And that meant that I could cover a lot of bases with just a few people since they knew me in so many different settings. And as for bad recommendation letters, I think it's a no-brainer that you shouldn't ask anyone who would speak of you badly. So probably don't ask a teacher whose class you failed or who gives you a lot of detentions, because that's not going to do you any favors. Another bad recommendation letter would come from someone who doesn't know you that well, because again, If you don't have a good relationship with the person you ask for a letter, they're not going to have that many good things to say about you. I've heard that some people ask for recommendation letters from their mayor or some other notable figure because they think that having the prestige of knowing that person would in some way help their application. And I don't think that's the case at all. Recommendation letters from notable people aren't necessarily better, unless that notable figure is also a person who can speak to your character really well. Because I think admissions officers care more about the content of the letter than who wrote the letter. Because at the end of the day, they're evaluating you and not the person who wrote your letter. I would also say to try and avoid getting average or mediocre letters. I think if the person writing your letter could replace your name with someone else's name and still have the letter make sense, then that letter probably isn't that good. Because in order for you to stand out in college admissions, your letters need to show that you're a unique person. Again, you want those letters to highlight your good personality traits, your different strengths, and whatever other qualities make you a unique and distinct person. You are special, and you need to find a recommender who can show admissions officers that. This brings me back to the point of having a good relationship with your recommenders. You want your recommenders to be able to talk about you personally, whether that's giving really specific insight into your character or giving different anecdotes about experiences they've had with you. You don't want your recommendation letter to just be a repetition of your resume, because admissions officers already see your Common App, so they already know all those things. You want your recommendation letters to help support your application as a whole, not just repeat information. So your recommender may write that you did this, this, and this, but they also need to expand on that. Just like when you're writing your college essays, the show don't tell rule also applies to your recommendation letters. So now that we've talked about different qualities that make a good and bad recommendation letter, let's talk more about the actual process of asking for them. So ideally, you would start asking your teachers for recommendation letters around the end of junior year. For me, I asked my teachers around late May and early June. And that's to give them enough time to actually think about and write your recommendation letters. Because if you think about it, out of your entire senior class, you're probably not the only person who asked that teacher for a letter. So the earlier you ask them for a letter, the more time that they actually have to write it. It may also be helpful to write a list of all the potential people you could ask for letters. Because if you think of all the adults who have helped guide you throughout high school, it may be hard to narrow it down to just one or two. Some advice I've heard is to ask your junior year teachers, since you'll be asking them while you still have them as your teachers. But I would say it's perfectly fine to ask teachers who you've had in previous years, so long as you have still maintained a good relationship with them. Another question I've seen a lot is about which subjects you should ask for teacher recommendations from. So for your teacher recommendations in particular, at least one of them has to be from a core subject. So if you have one or even multiple teacher recommendations, at least one of them should be from a teacher who teaches either math, science, English, social studies, and sometimes foreign language. And that doesn't necessarily mean you can't ask an elective teacher for a letter. You can ask them for one as a supplemental teacher recommendation, but your primary teacher recommendation letter should come from one of the core subject teachers. You may also want to do some strategic planning when you think about which subjects to ask from, because some schools have certain requirements. For example, at MIT, you have to have 2 recommendation letters. One of them has to come from either a math or science teacher, and the other one has to come from either an English or social studies teacher. Schools that have requirements like that are pretty rare, but that's definitely still something you need to keep in mind. So after you've thought about who you want to ask for recommendation letters, you have to actually go up to them and ask. I would say that you should ask them in person first, and then follow up with an email. I think that if you just start off with an email, it can come off as a little impersonal. So I would say you should ask in person first to establish that personal connection, and then you can follow up with an email as a sort of reminder to them. I know that things are pretty different right now since you can't just go and ask your teacher in person now, but a possible alternative to that could be asking them to hop in a Zoom call real quick, just so that you can see them face to face when you ask. And when you do follow up with them in the email, make sure that your request is written in a courteous way, because you're asking them to take the time out of their day to do something for you, and they have the right to say no to you. Whenever you ask someone for something, just in general, it's always a good idea to be courteous to them. And along with that courteous request, make sure to attach any additional materials that they might need. So that could be your resume, your transcript, or anything else that can help them when they're writing your letter. Because although you may know what you want them to write about, they may not know what they want to write about. So it's a good idea to include those additional materials so that they have more information to draw from. And after you sent them that email, hopefully you get a positive response back. And in most cases, teachers are usually happy to write recommendation letters. But in case they do say no for whatever reason, you can always refer back to the list you made previously and try another teacher. And finally, once you've gotten all your recommendation letters and you've sent off all your applications, you should write a thank you note or give some kind of gift to your recommenders, because it's always a good idea to show your appreciation when people do something for you. And while it's not required that you do that, it's just something nice you can do for them after they've helped you out so much. And that's all I have to say. This has been a brief overview on recommendation letters, and I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please be sure to leave a like and comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe for some more great content. It's free to you guys and it helps me grow as a channel. I'm doing my best to stick to 3 uploads a week, so if you'd like to keep up to date on all the videos I put out, feel free to subscribe. That's all for today, folks, so I'll see you next time. Bye!